How's everyone doing this morning? This is Chopping It Up Hardcore with Hal Capone, discussion number 67. Today, my special guest is Scott Mellinger from the epic, legendary band Zeo. He also was in Creation is Crucifixion. He was in Chapter. He's in a new band called Pact. It's kind of on an indie poppy flair, which is kind of different from what he usually does. Super interested to talk to him about that. Can't wait to talk to him about the old school days. Like I said, Creation and Chapter is some of my favorite stuff still to this day. And just can't wait to talk about Crimson Corridor as well. Just a crushing album. I'm going to grab you right now, Scott.
How you doing?
Yo, what's up? Here, let me get this so I don't look like I'm half of a person. There we go.
Perfect.
All right, let me turn you up. There we go. Okay.
Sweet. You can hear me fine?
I can hear you good. Yep.
Good. I want to thank you so much for taking time out to do this with me. Super stoked when you said you were willing to do it. I know that we were talking a little bit about you with the Creation guys. That was like great talk, and I wish you could have jumped on and just talked a little bit about Creation too. When Paul, Michael, and Nathan were on with me, that was super fun for me.
Oh yeah, dude, I watched that. Yeah, it was really actually that's what I saw like through Nathan's thing that they were going to do that. So Russ, the guy that plays guitar in Zaya with me, is like, I mean, all of us grew up in the same area, so like all of us were fans of each other. So he's like a Chapter guy. He likes Creation too, and he's like, "Did you watch the Creation thing?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, I forgot about it." So I watched that, and then I like actually reached out to Nathan and Paul, and we had like a cool little Zoom chat after you guys did yours. So yeah,
awesome.
dude. Yeah, I remember all that stuff, and it was such a great time and very fond of that time period. So.
Yeah. That's I'm like I said, I'm kind of old, so that's my little niche of music. That back then is late '90s, like mid '90s, early 2000s. That's like really what I still listen to this day. Even though I listen to a lot of new bands too as well, but that's my go-to every time I'm about to listen to some music or whatnot.
Oh, that's awesome. I mean, sort of too, like, I mean, I do like a lot of newer stuff, but like we were talking about last night, like there are things that from that time period, like, Abnegation, like that kind of stuff that I can still listen to today. And what fascinates me is like how you now see how ahead of its time it was. Because there's bands doing what Abnegation did better back then. They're doing that now, and it's still not as good.
Yeah.
But it's so cool to see, like, because back then when you're just in it, like you don't even realize, or like even the Creation stuff. Like obviously there's death metal bands that were doing that kind of thing, totally insane, and also like Dillinger became what Dillinger was, which is one of my favorite bands of all time too. But yeah, like it's just cool to, like, when you're in that, you don't even realize, like, you don't feel like you're ahead of anything. You're just kind of doing what you're doing. And then now to see how bands are doing their things now, it's crazy to think what we were doing back in like late '90s,
Yeah. Speaking of Abnegation, like we were talking about last night, when you mentioned Hopes of Harmony, I mean, still to this day, I love that song so much,
Oh my
especially
God, yeah.
with Natural Born Killers sound,
Yep.
clip in there. It's just like, when I first heard it, it blew me away. I was like, oh my God, this song is so crushing. And especially like the 7-inch, what's it called? Extinguish the Sickness.
Oh yeah.
Like,
we were talking, I have all those up, like, yeah.
And it's funny too, because once Iggy left, I kind of, not to diss what happened to Abnegation afterwards, but like I stopped listening to him after Iggy had left. So
Well, yeah, there was like, I guess, I mean, I did too. I kind of fell off of it because there was something really magical and special about like Iggy, Paul, Dave, and Chris. And then they had Nate play guitar. I think that was when I was kind of still following them. There was, I mean, Paul was by himself here and there, but we did the Chapter tour with them when Paul was by himself, I believe. But like Dave Steele's one of my favorite dudes, and I know he was still kind of in the iteration. Him and Chris were in the iteration of Abnegation that basically went just straight death metal. Not that stuff. Like I think what it is if it wasn't what like because the Abnegation I fell in love with was like more. I don't like more what I consider metalcore. Like I don't think metalcore is what people say it is. Just maybe because it's our time period. Like metalcore to me was like literally Slayer and Earth Crisis, like that. Not like singing, not like any of that kind of stuff. Like it was just like, you know, you're gonna have Slayer riffs and then you're gonna have breakdowns like Biohazard breakdowns with like Slayer riffs, like which whatever. But Abnegation, and then like too what they talked about, you know, like the veganism, straight edge, all that kind of stuff. Like back in that time period, we were all super like just all about and interested in. And when it like totally veered from that, not that that's a bad thing, because people change, that's fine. I didn't follow it after that. So.
Yeah, me too. Now, speaking of veganism and straight edge and stuff like that, did Earth Crisis kind of catch you first, and then that kind of, because I think I heard Earth Crisis a few years before I had heard Abnegation, and then Abnegation just felt more natural to me because it was more aggressive, chaotic, like, visceral than Earth Crisis. Were you caught up in like Earth Crisis first, and that kind of...
Actually, what happened for me, which is almost unfair, is Abnegation was essentially like a local band to us. So what I saw before anything, I didn't even know this like world existed. And I have to credit Nathan for a lot of this, because Nathan brought he was way ahead of the curve, man. He was so into all this underground stuff that he like in high school, he would bring it to people. And like he was talking about, we had a very small coalition of like us weirdo guys, people that like were skaters and got made fun of and all that stuff in our high school. So it wasn't a ton of people we could talk to. When I met Nathan brought all that world to me, but it was the local scene around where we grew up that like really got to me first. So I don't know if Nathan talked about a band they were called Transit 187, and then they became Passover, which Zeo talks about. We've talked about them a bunch, but like they were literally in our town. Like I still see Jack and Brad and all those guys here and there around town, but that band started it all for me, because they were basically what that was: chaos, hardcore, screams, like everything that like it just blew my mind. And then Abnegation was just like a more cohesive, consistent version. Like they were like a band that was around a little longer, and they were like keyed in, like and when I saw them, it just totally took over my world. But from like Passover and Abnegation and all that, and like there were way too many cool bands around us. There was this band called Puritan that all of us went nuts about.
Oh yeah, Puritan.
Yeah. Dude, they were like, they were from like IUP Penn State area, so they were like a couple hours away. So we would get to see them play. Like it was just unbelievable for that time for us. But from that is where like, oh, there's this band Earth Crisis that's been doing this for a long time. Oh wow, that exists. Okay, so like there's this New York, like there's this New York stuff. And then what really, really grabbed me was the Boston area stuff. So like Overcast, Aftershock. I mean, to this day, Cave-In's still one of my favorite bands of all time. But like them and Converge and all that stuff. So like that whole area, like Overcast crushed me.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, like it's funny though, because like I think locally, the local scene kind of opened me up to all the other stuff that was around.
Yeah, it's funny because like the Boston scene and the New England scene was like thriving at that point. The Pennsylvania scene was thriving. Florida scene was thriving at that point. It was almost like, the whole coast of the East Coast was really thriving at that time, and everybody had like a really, really cool scene. I was lucky enough because like living around the Boston area and New Hampshire and stuff like that, I got to see Converge and Cave-In and Piebald and
Piebald. I love Piebald. Yeah.
Like a million times, because they were pretty much at every show that was, a bigger show around here.
Mhm.
So I kind of got spoiled a little bit and almost like took it for granted because like you see those bands so much and then you don't realize like what a scene it was until you look back years later, you know what I mean? And you're like, holy shit, this scene was really, really cool. And a lot of people kind of missed out on it. And it's, like I said, from afar, I was always looking at Pennsylvania, that scene, like Wilkes Bar Fest,
Mhm.
just like really, really good scene there. And like I said, Florida too, with like Reversal Man and Combat Wounded Veteran and even like Omega Man, which a lot of people don't talk about, or Bird of Ill Omen and stuff like that,
Mhm.
and Culture and
Oh,
Morning Again, like
dude, culture, yeah. Well, actually, it's funny because like I can't. When I look at back at that time period, and I think about like all the stuff that Zeo does, even to this day, like from like when I joined that to like now us still doing whatever. Every connection I have comes from back then. Like our merch company, Holy Mountain. Danny
yeah,
was. I met Danny when we were still, and we didn't even realize that we like talked about it. But Danny did a zine called. It was his last name Sober, so it was like Sober,
yeah.
and he was on tour with Culture when Chapter was playing. So he like
Oh no
came to
kidding.
So he came to PA with Culture. I think he was like, I don't know if he was like tour managing, I guess, like whatever, like just a buddy that would follow along. But I met him through that. So he does all the Zayo's merchandise. And then like you were like with Overcast. And I don't even know if Brian realizes this, but like Chapter played a ton of shows with Overcast, and then Zayo played a ton of shows with Shadows Fall. So
Yeah,
like it's crazy to me the circle that exists from that early stuff. Like there's a ton of people I still talk to, a ton of like people like that kind of live in like, even if they're, let's say, like at some of the clubs we play, like some of the guys that do some of the booking, like all these guys that came from this crazy underground metal scene or hardcore metal scene.
yeah.
A lot of them exist today that I still talk to from that time period.
Yeah, and especially with Creation too, playing shows with more underground, like I guess people start calling them screamo bands back then.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't really love that term so much, but Creation played with like a bunch of, on top of metalcore bands, a lot of screamo bands too, which was cool. And we always talk, like on my discussions, we always talk about back then you would see, kind of like an emo band play with like a crushing metalcore
Oh
band, and
yeah.
then you
Mm-hmm.
like it would be staggered on the genres of like, but it would be the coolest show because you would get exposed to different kinds of music and stuff like that. It kind of isn't that much nowadays, but back then it was really, really a variety of bands set in one show, which was really,
No,
really cool back then.
I absolutely loved that. And that's actually like we just did Furnace Fest. And
Mm.
Furnace Fest make it feels like that because like you have bands like us and Converge and Every Time I Die and Cave In played, and then you had Thursday and you had Mineral play and you had all these different like, and I'm the same way. Like I kind of love that. I remember when
Yeah,
and I trying to think of like Creation did a couple different festivals that were like that, but the shows, like the local shows we did, were always a big mismatch, like you're talking about. And earlier Zeo shows were like that because I remember when Zeo played with Piebald, even though Piebald has like a sort of a vibe that works okay, but like they were still like they had a little more pop punk singy kind of thing to them,
yeah,
and it didn't seem out of place to us, man. I love that. I love being on shows where you had, like you said, like just something that would just like you couldn't hear after you were done, but then you'd have like a straight up emo band play and everybody was still cool and like wanted to hear everything,
yeah,
like I mean I listen, like I could literally in my car now put on Deicide, Suffocation, and then Sunny Day Real Estate and The Cure.
yeah,
So it's like I
yeah.
think our generation, like I have such an eclectic like taste. I like so much different stuff, and a lot of us, I think, it really like kind of blossomed from like, hey, well, we're gonna have like this emo band play, this basically death metal band play, this hardcore band play, and it all worked.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Furnace Fest, the lineup was ridiculous. I have to mention the Casket Lottery because
Oh
they're
yeah,
like
yeah.
they're one of my favorite bands of all time. Like I love Casket Lottery. I actually spoke with Nathan Ellis a while back too on one of these discussions too, and just a great guy.
That's
But
awesome.
like I love Casket Lottery, and on top of that, Coalesce, being in
Oh,
Coalesce, and talking about that band with him was like super fun
that's
because they're
actually.
one of. Go
Oh, I'm
ahead.
sorry. I was going to say that Coalesce was one of the bands that I was super sad to see not get reunited to do anything. And I thought I was hoping they would like get Coalesce to play Furnace Fest because that band's one of my favorites. But go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just saying it was just now you played with Coalesce a few times, right? But with
Yeah.
Creation or
Well,
and
I don't remember. I think I think it was possibly with Creation. I know we played some shows with them when I was in Zeo, and actually there was a time where like this is a long time ago when Jesse was kind of possibly going to do like a side project with Sean, but it never came to fruition or whatever. But yeah, we played a bunch of. I think Creation did play with them a lot, but like a lot of my memory of Creation um, really kind of revolved around more because I did one like U.S. tour with them that got far enough like to the West Coast and everything, which was my first tour that I ever went on.
yeah,
But a lot of what I remember was like we would do a lot of like Ohio stuff, and Chicago was like a big hub for me when we played with them because like we really became friends, really close with the like the guys in Race Trader,
yeah,
and I mean essentially close enough. Like when I left Creation, Carl took over for me. So Carl played with Carl was in Race Trader for like here and there. He also did a band called Kill the Slave Master with Andy Hurley.
yeah,
So like we were really all close with all those Chicago dudes. Like that's what like Pete Wentz was cool, like in a bunch of that stuff. So, but Monty and all the guys and Dan from Race Trader, that's kind of what my like main memory of like bands that we were close with. Because those dudes were really really cool and kind of vibed on the same type of stuff as like politically and ideologically. Um, but and like I know we did some New York stuff, but I don't remember any of the like really like hitting it off with anybody. You know, like we really hit like because when we were in Chapter, obviously we hit it off really well with the Abnegation guys, which is why Paul ended up becoming the guitar player with Creation,
yeah,
and like the guys that were in our town, and Cleveland had some cool bands like Acrid. What was there's so much stuff, man. There were so many good bands from that time period. We played Grade was like I remember playing with Grade a couple times, and Zeo did play with Grade too.
yeah,
And this was when Grade was kind of like just more of like a screamy band, and then they ended up kind of moving into a little more stuff. But
yeah,
yeah, it's weird. Oh, you know what? Another thing I thought that was really funny. There was a really cool festival that we played in. I think it was like DC area, and I listened to I was on a podcast a couple months ago called Scotch and Good Conversation, and he did a podcast with Adam and His Package. And I
Oh, no
remember,
kidding.
yeah, and I remember playing like Creation played with Adam and His Package, which there again, look
Yeah,
how great that is. Like totally
yeah,
separate things, you know?
yeah. It's funny you mentioned Adam and His Package because I had seen Adam and His Package at a few fests up in here. There was a fest called Tin Can Full of Dreams that
Okay.
Pete Zetlin from Sinaloa used to put on. I think he did four. I think there's four of them, and
Okay.
they had a bunch of great bands play. You know what I mean? It was like Force Fed Glass. You know, back then I saw like Seisha. I
Oh
saw
man.
Portrait from like I think they were from Atlanta, Georgia, with the violin. I don't know if you've heard of Portrait, but they were really
I
good.
think that sounds really familiar.
Jerome's Dream had played that fest.
Okay, I know
You know,
that.
and then on top of that, like he had Reversal of Man play, and you know, it was just like a super fun fest every year that he had it, and it's funny that you said Adam and his package because he played, I think, 2 of those fests.
Oh, that's awesome.
So going back to what I usually talk about, I always ask, what got you first into hardcore and punk and metal, and what were you listening to beforehand? I know on a couple other podcasts that I listened to, you said Johnny Cash was kind of like, you know, a little influence when you were younger, and then you kind of got into like the metal thrash type of stuff. Just can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So honestly, I think what really got me into wanting to be in a band was just like I had so many friends that started kind of at the same time I did. So we all just wanted to do something that wasn't like, well, I mean, we live in a pretty depressed area, which I think Nathan kind of brought up. So there was really nothing to do. And like, I didn't want to get into like being a piece of shit, like drug person.
Yeah.
Like, not that, I mean, I'm whatever, people could do whatever they want. Like, I didn't want to be like fall into that kind of thing, because that does have a lot to do with around here. But so we just like got into the music thing. But yeah, so early on, my grandfather was the like key motivator for me to play guitar.
Yeah.
And he was all about like, you know, the early Johnny Cash, well, like Waylon Jennings, like all that kind of like outlaw kind of country stuff.
Yeah.
So I had like a deep love for that just early on in my life. And then, yeah, the thrash, like Metallica, Testament, Slayer, all that stuff totally opened me up to like, whoa, you can do that with a guitar. So that really kind of like just totally took over everything for me. And then my parents were really supportive of me playing guitar, because like with my grandfather doing it, I don't know if they were, you know, because a lot of parents are like, oh, that can't do that for a living, so what are you even messing around with it?
Yeah.
But since my grandfather did it, I think it like definitely helped with their like, oh no, this is a good thing. Like he needs, we want to have Scott do this kind of stuff because maybe it'll keep him out of trouble, right? So, which it did, because like I just sit at home and practice all the time and play all the time because I loved it. But yeah, like definitely early on, Metallica, Slayer, all that kind of stuff really opened me up to wanting to really get into the guitar. My parents got me lessons, so I took lessons for like a year or two. And then like just so many friends in our area that like there was, like I said, nothing going on. So a lot of us kind of like congregated together and started trying to play with like we would cover Metallica or Anthrax or whatever. We would do all this kind of stuff. Or like Danzig was like a big thing back. Like I still love Danzig, but we would cover like Danzig 1 and early Misfits crap. And so we were just trying to do something. And then some of us like kept doing it. And that's when like through our high school, I met Nathan, and I mean, I did bands before I met Nathan and all those guys, but like, I met Nathan. Dan Deemer was like a really close friend of all of us, which he passed not a couple, probably a good bit away of time now. But Dan played with what they were when he said about the 12 Cup thing. Like Dan Deemer played that. Lachlan was in that. I don't even know who played. I know Tim Krupar played bass in Chapter with us for a long time, but I think he played in the 12 Cup era stuff. But they kind of sounded sort of like, they reminded me, like it was kind of like Clutch. Like that kind of stuff. Yeah. And then Chapter kind of built from there, because me and Dan were really, really close. And then like became friends with Nathan and all those guys. And then all of us just started getting straight up into death metal. Like all of us were listening to like Morbid Angel and all that kind of stuff. And we were just like, man, we want to kind of introduce like this insane kind of fast stuff and just try to play that.
Yeah.
But I think what ends up happening, which is almost, you kind of fall into this kind of thing. Like Nathan was really knowledgeable about like the underground scene. So like I give him all the credit in the world. But I really think we just sort of fell into like, we want to play death metal, but you cannot get on metal shows. You just can't. Like in Pittsburgh, you would have to either sell tickets to play on those shows, or And like if you didn't sell all the tickets, then it comes out of your pocket. So it's essentially you're
Yeah.
paying to play. But we created a scene right around us that, and luckily we had a few venues that were totally cool with like, you guys just play. You're not going to owe us anything. You just play. So what ended up happening was I think a lot of people were just so like, oh my God, there's shows that you don't have to really, they're not super expensive, like $4 or $5 to play to go see. And we had a ton of people around here that wanted to see that stuff. So we would do local shows and have like 300 people there. And there were like a few, like I said, there was Illusions in Latrobe where I live, and Dairy Theater, which isn't too far from us. And both of these places were really, really cool with letting high school bands play, not charging us to do anything. And then they would just take whatever. I mean, you wouldn't really get paid, but so you didn't have to pay to play. And, you know, they would take the cut from the door. You would get a tiny little bit, but whatever. I mean, it was really like, I feel like it was really helpful for all of it because it did do really well. Like those shows were pretty well attended for what that was. So that I think that built up the scene around here and like ended up like having all these different people come from this area that started bands. I mean, like all the Juliana Theory guys we're friends with, but Brett played in Zeo before and they had bands before all that stuff, that all of this stuff blossomed because there was a scene.
Yeah.
So it gave all of us this like opportunity to like see like, wait, so you could like do your own thing, just kind of do it, and maybe 200 people would come, and it might not be like you're going to make a living, but man, you got to actually do this.
Yeah.
So I think it opened all of our eyes like, wow, we could actually just do this. And Nathan's like with his knowledge of like how like all the different things that were going on with it and like some of the stuff that he got into and introduced all of us. I mean, it was just such a cool learning time, you know? So yeah, I really I don't think anything would happen. Like Zeo wouldn't have existed like it does. Like there's so many bands that wouldn't exist without this whole area.
Yeah, definitely. Now, Chapter was kind of like your first band that you played shows in, though, right? Basically.
Well, I did some really, really horrible high school bands that played these little local areas, but like Chapter was the first band that like got any kind of attention outside of just like our little tiny town.
Yeah.
Chapter was the first band that like played real shows, like played like actual shows with like bands that I knew were real bands.
Yeah.
Because like we would play, like we'd Chapter play with Overcast, and we all knew who Overcast was, you know.
Yes. Yes.
So.
Sins of Our Fathers, was that the first thing you guys put out, that 7-inch, or was it? Or did you come out with a demo first? Because like I don't know if that's the first thing I heard. I might have heard the Abnegation Chapter split first.
Okay.
Up here, I got my hands on it. You know, I knew who Abnegation was at the time, and you know, the cover, I was like, oh, this is kind of a cool cover. Like, and I think I remember Very Distribution.
Oh yeah,
that catalog. I would always sift through that, and then I would read the write-ups, and I'd be like, oh my God, I gotta get this. So I was always buying records and CDs and stuff like that. So I think that's how I got the Abnegation Chapter split. And once I heard it, I was like, oh shit,
well, the crazy thing to me about that Abnegation Chapter split is Paul and those dudes had one song ready. They didn't have. I can't remember which one. So there was Blanket of Black, and then there was, I forget the other song on that 7-inch. One of the songs was done. The other song they didn't even have anything ready for. They wrote the fucking song then. They wrote it then, recorded it then, right after they figured it out. They just like, they're like, oh, we got to write this. And they wrote it, and they were and I remember me and Nathan going, holy shit, this is better than anything we work on. And they literally just wrote it just now. Like it was insane. I couldn't believe it. They just like Paul and Chris was like, here's what we're gonna do, and like totally worked it all out. And it was one of the sickest songs ever. And me and Nathan were like, oh dude, their songs are so much better than ours on here. And literally they just wrote this one now. Yeah, like, oh God, it was so sick. So I think there was a Chapter demo.
Yeah.
And then the Sins of Our Fathers 7-inch came from that demo.
Yeah.
And then we did, I think, yeah, the Chapter Aggregation Split was literally the thing that put Chapter like on the map for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then there was a couple other Chapter splits, which,
Junta, was that
yeah.
That split?
So another funny story is I remember when we were like, all of us were into Overcast, and Overcast had that song. I think the song was called Grifter, but I can't remember for sure. That might be it. And there was a breakdown in that Grifter song that I was like, oh my God, this is one of the coolest things I've ever heard.
Yeah.
And that was what inspired me to write Descent from Heaven for that. And still to this, like, Descent from Heaven is one of my favorite Chapter, creation songs or whatever. That song I still love. I mean, I love all of that stuff, but like Descent from Heaven was awesome. I remember doing like when we did the Throne or Devour 7-inch, like some of that stuff was just so much fun to be a part of. But Descent from Heaven was totally inspired by an Overcast song.
And the cool thing about Chapter 2 is you guys didn't wait to put out the discography. It was kind of like, wasn't it 98 that the discography came out for Chapter? Because most bands wait,
years.
10 years till a discovery, and you guys kind of, pushed it out right away, which is kind of cool to have all that in one thing.
Honestly, that's all credit to Nathan. Like, he was just so keyed in and so into what he was doing with the band. Like, and I hate to, like, I don't think he necessarily was like a businessman with the band, but he just knew what he wanted to do, and he knew how to do it cool. Like, Nathan was able to, like, he was such, even back then, like, his designing ideas and everything that he now ends up being his career, he was just so good at all of it. And, I think with his, like, without him, I mean, none of the stuff would have really went anywhere. Like, we would have just all probably ended up playing in Greensburg. So his knowledge, his like real fire to do this kind of stuff, that's why that discography even existed. I mean, he was working to try to get, he wanted things to be released so people knew, and what he was on fire to do all that stuff. And dude, honestly, like, I would honestly have to say, like, a lot of the reason why I have the drive that I do, like, to play and do this kind of stuff, I think was really embedded from him, because I watched him, like, when he wanted to do something, he just put his mind to it, and he worked, and that's really it. Like, a lot of bands, especially today, like, I don't think it's hard to quantify and put into perspective the work that you had to do back then. And but it wasn't work because it was super fun, So it was like you had to really, really bust your ass to, like, get people to pay attention at all. And, like, there's just so many things, like, with the DIY world that, like, man, it just wasn't really easy. And now, like, it's really weird to think, like, how it's been cool to have people around me that have been such a big, push, like, people that were able to really, like, they had, like, this like mindset to, like, work really hard to get things done. Like with Nathan, when I joined Zeo, like, Jesse and those guys had a drive. And now, like, with Zeo, like, with me, he's just on it, just like how I remember Nathan was, man. Like, we're kind of back into that kind of day, like, where it was, like, all for, like, we just did everything ourselves, and we tried to, like, push and work as hard as we could to get things done. And if you want a discography out, you do it. Don't wait around for somebody to be like, hey, Chapter was awesome 10 years after the fact. Like, no, like, we want to get it done. Let's do it,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And Chapters, like, the last songs that you kind of wrote turned into creation songs, correct?
Yeah. Yeah, like, some of them, well, like, Descent from Heaven was a Chapter song that ended up being a creation song. There was a weird song, man, I can't remember the names of them now, but, like, there were a few songs right at the end of Chapter that were getting a little more, like, like intricate, like in the guitar work.
Yeah.
And because some of the like early chapter stuff was like more like Earth Crisis, like just real basic, right? Not that, I mean, whatever. They're still awesome songs. Who cares? It doesn't matter if it's like hard to play or not. But
exactly.
there were some like chapter songs at the end that were like really intricate. So we ended up being able to like either like modify them. Like there was a song, one of the songs on the chapter Abnegation split turned into like a lot crazier creation song. I think it was like "And the Floods Came," I think it was called, but then it like morphed into something else when we did the Dethrone or Devour 7-inch. I think there was like a riff or something from that stuff that we like moved over. Run with the Hunted, I think, was what the one was that we turned it into.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. So like, So like some of that chapter stuff definitely like either like stayed the same, like Descent from Heaven was just what it was, and then some of them we modified because we wanted. Because we did, like when Paul came in, like everything turned into like, holy shit, this is. I want to impress Paul, so let's write some good crazy riffs. And then Paul was coming with awesome stuff, and I was even joking with those dudes the other day. I'm like, I think I could maybe play some of that. I don't know, man, because it's been so long. I don't know if I could play that stuff now, but man,
that Dethrone or Devour, that was on King of Monsters, correct?
Yes,
was that
I
on
think.
King of Monsters, which was a cool label back then too. And it's weird that it was based in Arizona, but like they were taking bands. I mean, Reversal was on that label, and it's a cool label that they were kind of reaching out from all over America and getting cool bands to get on that label.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember how King of the Monsters got on Nathan's radar, because I don't know if did they put out there was a band from like California called Gehenna that I think there's a couple bands that might have that name now, but like there was this band that we followed, and I think King of the Monsters put them out, and then King of the Monsters did the Puritan Reversal of Man split, which that was just awesome, incredibly awesome. But I can't remember what really put King of the Monsters on the radar for us, other than I know Mike Gens like reached out because he was a fan of some of the stuff we were doing. So, and that's the thing too. Man, it's so cool to think about all that back then, because like it was just like you were just dudes that like wanted to see stuff happen. Like it wasn't really like, oh well, we want to make money from this record, so let's get this and we're gonna do it this way and distribute it. Just no, it was like, dude, I just love this band and I'm gonna start a label because nobody else is doing it. You know?
Yeah, definitely. Now, what actually were you on playing-wise on Creation? I know you did the first couple 7-inches. In Silico was you did that. Which speaking of In Silico, I never.
Oh, that's awesome.
There's some CDs that I just don't ever get rid of, and I've had this for the longest time. And I love that album. That's probably one of my favorite Creation albums of all time. And I know you was it that you wrote a few songs in Automata, but like you left at that point.
Yeah, like I didn't play on that record, but we did. There was a 7-inch or two that happened after In Silico and all that kind of stuff. That some of those songs actually went on to that record. Yeah. Like Iconography of John Henry was a song I worked with. What was the other one?
Did you do were you on the Unra split?
What song? Oh man, I'm gonna have to, dude. I have all those 7-inches.
It was like I know Suicide Nation was a split back then. And
I was with that. I was on with Suicide Nation. I don't remember if I was on the record that. I remember the Unra split, but I don't know if I was on there or not. Yeah. But there was a 7-inch that had, and I don't know if it was splits or not, but there was like Iconography, the Allegory of the Algorithm was one of the songs that I did that ended up being on something else, I think, that I was part of. Iconography of John Henry, that song, oh my God, I remember when we wrote that song. When we finished like listening to that, oh God, it had everything I wanted. Like it had everything I was hoping. Like, and that really was what it was, man. You would write Creation songs, and it would be like we just got to make it. We got to top ourselves every time, every time, every time. And I remember when we got that one done, I was like, dude, this has gone everywhere that I think we can go, and I don't know if I'll ever do anything cooler than this one.
Now, I know people have asked too about you leaving Creation. I know you said that it wasn't Nathan's speeches and rhetoric and stuff like that. And I know that Creation was kind of going into they were heavy on the noise aspect of things in between songs and other things going on. Was that kind of what spurred you to you wanted to play more music and not so much of the, it was still crushing music of what they were doing musically, but they were doing a lot of other things as well. Was that kind of where you were just like, I just want to play music?
Yeah, I think although I respected and totally identified with everything that Nathan talked about, and I don't, like I said before, I don't think it was it really wasn't anything like that that made me leave. I think I kind of wanted to be more like a musician playing and songs were being played. And it wasn't so much like all the extra things that were happening. I was more like, hey, I really want to write a ton of stuff, and I want to write songs, and I want to get out there and play the songs, and I want that to be more of the primary focus than all this other awesome stuff.
Yeah.
I love all that stuff, but just for me at the time, and two, I think really what it was, I grew up, me and Nathan were really good friends when we were together in the band, and there was never anything whatever that personally would be anything weird, but I became a lot closer with Russ and Dan at that time period. I was hanging out with those guys way more than I was hanging out with the guys in Creation. Because Nathan, he moved into Pittsburgh, which isn't it's not far, but Russ and Dan and all those dudes were literally 10 minutes from where I was. So I would hang out with those guys all the time. And I think it just ended up being man, I had a lot more fun hanging out with those guys. And little did I know what it would entail to join that band. But I really did feel I just felt more I fit in with those guys a little bit better. And I knew they were kind of more focused on we're going to just be a band. And that was really, really appealing to me at that time, because I was man, not that any of us ever thought music could be something I would be. Honestly, I never thought I'd still be playing now. You would be oh, I'd get a couple years out of this, and then it doesn't matter. I'll work some shitty job and hate my life for 30 years. But, but yeah, I think that's really, it was just I wanted to be more a music first band, and then I became a lot personally closer with Russ and Dan and then Jesse, and then it's funny because dude, even the band now, we have Jeff and Marty. I've known Marty since high school. I knew Jeff since high school. So we're all it's all just a friend family, thing. But yeah, I think that's really a lot of it, because I really just wanted to be in a band that played music more.
Yeah, and that, there was I know it's always talked about too with you, was there was no concern from being coming from an anti-religious band to a known Christian metalcore band. I know at that time though, when you joined, they were kind of not getting away from that. They still had the values there, but they weren't pushing the Christian agenda over the top or anything like that. Was there any concerns from you just coming from a band like that and then going to a band that was known for such big Christian values and stuff like that?
A little bit. I mean, I think it's such a weird thing to even talk or think about, because I know a lot of people, and I think it's rightfully so that we get tagged with this, because I think a lot of bands should be called out for this a little bit. I do think that the Christian metal scene, industry, as a band, there were some easier roads you could take than the roads where a Creation or a Chapter would take. So I remember when I left Creation, we would play shows, and if it was a festival, you would be pretty happy with like a big, I mean, there were festivals that had huge turnouts, but like if Creation would just play a show on their own, if there were 30 people there, you'd be like, holy shit.
Yeah.
And then I remember joining Zeo, and like first show I played with them, there were 300 people.
Yeah.
And I'm like, so like, I do think like that Christian underground metal scene like grew, and it like really did allow for things to kind of come a little easier.
Yeah.
So I won't deny that I think that stuff did actually exist. But when I joined Zeo, that was when they were, like you were saying, they were sort of transitioning out. Like, I don't think, like right now, like Zeo is not a Christian band. Like I am like completely atheist, and I've never really been Christian ever.
Yeah.
But like I'm 100% not in the belief of anything. But I respect anybody. You can do whatever you want. I don't care.
Yeah.
Everybody, like Zeo does. That's not even a thing for us. Nobody in the band, like Marty, still holds some of those Christian values, but he's totally open-minded, not closed-minded in like the Trump era Christian type of thing, where like. But I think his values are a lot different than what people even put on there today. So like we all respect each other, and I love everybody. I don't care what you believe. Like I don't believe it. And all of us, like that hasn't been the primary focus. When I joined the band though, with Liberate, all of us were like, we liked really metal stuff. Like we weren't really like into, I mean, and we played a ton of shows with the bands that were on the label with us. But we were also really, really trying to like immediately get out with bands that like, for example, some of my first shows and tours with Zeo were Nile, Today Is the Day. We played a ton of shows with like a lot of the other like victory bands, like Darkest Hour was like a band Zeo played with a ton.
Yeah.
If I gave you a list of the bands, dude, you'd blow it. Like Lamb of God, but when they were Burn the Priest played with Zeo. So like that, we played with a ton of like things that ended up what ended up being Killswitch Engage.
Yeah.
We played a ton of Unearthed was like one of our favorite bands to play with. Under Oath played with us a ton of times. Under Oath was a label mate though. But Zeo was branching out to play shows like that. So like a lot of the first shows I played were like Nile, Today Is the Day, Napalm Death. We played 3 shows with Napalm Death. Or we would work with like victory bands. Like we'd play shows with but we really were trying to break away from that Christian stuff and played a lot more with a lot of those other bands. But we would do Cornerstones every year when I was in the band, because one, it was like financially really made sense.
Yeah.
And we're not gonna dude, I'm not gonna deny anybody. I'll play for anybody. I don't give a shit. Like I'll play for anybody. So, so Zeo was definitely breaking free of all that stuff, and so it wasn't some easy road for us. Like I remember how hard it was, and how, man, you try playing in front of Nile fans. Holy shit. Or like, dude, we played a show in New York with that band Accept, Balls to the Wall, that shit.
Yeah.
Dude, we had somebody grabbed my mic stand and threw it at me to get off stage. So, like it was brutal. And then like Zeo played with Converge back when Converge was still like underground, and nobody they weren't like the behemoth that they are now. We played with them. We tried to play with everybody. We did a ton of different fests. Like there was this really, really cool fest in Louisville called Crazy Fest that like had a lot of like there was a lot of that like movement away from all that kind of stuff when I joined the band. So it really wasn't like personally, honestly, we never even talked about it. Like that wasn't even a thing that was talked about in the band van, or like there, like the whole religion thing. Like, dude, it literally, you could have taken a Creation tour van and a Zeo tour van, and you'd be like, oh, they're exactly the same.
Yeah. Well, it's funny too, because my background is kind of, I was brought up Catholic, but I'm an atheist. You know what I mean? And it didn't really matter to me back then either, because I was listening to Slayer, and then I was listening to all the Christian, metalcore bands too, because like here's a band like Overcome. I fucking love Overcome. I love Overcome.
I'll give you
good.
some. Not only is Overcome amazing, the dudes in like Jason Stinson is to this day one of my favorite human beings that have ever walked the face of this earth. Like, and that's what I mean. Like, I think a lot of people like have a weird viewpoint of what those people are. Like, dude, they weren't like, nobody was like, there wasn't like prayer circles like people would say. There wasn't like condemnation. Like, dude, most of the dudes that I knew that were like open to gay marriage and like all that kind of stuff first were all the Christian dudes that we hung out, like the dudes in Overcome, like the dudes like the dudes in like Strong Arm and Further Seems Forever eventually, like which Further is one of my favorite bands to this day too. But yeah, these guys, like, people, man, it is not like, honestly, I don't even know how half of, like, I don't even really think anymore now like that you would classify them as what people think Christianity is today. Like, they were way more open. It wasn't condemnation and that kind of stuff. It was really like, hey, we're here and we're just going to love everybody. And that's kind of what the thing was. It wasn't like, oh, you can't do this. And like even some of the Christian bands I see today, like, I think that, what band was it, man? There's some band that the dude just keeps talking about dumb shit all the time. I don't know if it's that Skillet band, maybe. There's some singer or one of those bands that, like, he always has some horse shit that he's talking about. And I'm just like, oh God, it makes me so sick to my stomach to think that I'm like, that we're even involved, or like that there's even like a possibility that somebody would go, oh, Skillet, Zeo's from that scene. Like, oh no.
I always talk about Overcome too, though, because they don't get enough shine. A lot of people don't really even, listen to Overcome, and if you go back and listen to their catalog, I mean, When Beauty Dies is one of my favorite albums of all time. Like, that album is fucking crushing. Like, I love that album so much.
It's so good. Oh, it's what's funny. Here, look about another circle of hanging out with people, right? So, like, the Overcome dudes. All those dudes were friends with Mike Gens. Like, Jason, when Zeo went to Arizona when I first joined, and I met all the Overcome guys, and Stinson and all those dudes, and Ethan Pajak. Oh, like, dude, I can't even, like, those guys are the best guys ever. But Mike would go to those shows. Mike was at those shows. I talked to Mike and I was like, hey, you put out a creation. He's like, oh, you were, yeah, dude. So it's funny how there's just all that stuff. It circles. Like, everybody, those people exist everywhere. Like,
Yeah, it's cool. Now, were you a Zeo fan before you joined, like Splinter Shard and obviously, Liberate, like, after Blood and Fire is kind of a, it's tough to go after such a, that album is like one of my favorites of all time too. But I think Liberate, like, man, that, like, I wasn't expecting that. Put it that way. Like, members changed a little bit, and then that came out, and I was like, holy shit, this is, like, just as good. Like, it's crushing, it's fucking brutal. Like, and speaking of that too, is I never got rid of this either.
Oh, nice.
It's pretty old. It's stood the test of time. It's scratched up and stuff, but I've never gotten rid of this either. So awesome.
No, yeah, because like, I remember when that earlier Zeo stuff, like the Sean Jonas era Zeo would play. I mean, we played shows with them with Creation. So they were definitely like, I think I started to get a little out of that, like, more simplistic kind of hardcore metal stuff a little more. Like, I was way, by that time when, like, I found the Splinter Shards guys, like, and we loved, like, I loved all those dudes. Like, Roy, Roy's one of my favorite people. Sean, we've talked to. Mick is one of my favorite people. Like, all the guys that were involved with that early Zeo stuff are great. Eric Reeder, all of them. They're so good. Such good dudes. But I was kind of like more like, I'm going to listen to, like, Pierce from Within. So, like, even Earth Crisis, as much as I love Earth Crisis, which is the thing that I wasn't really listening to anymore. And I think those guys were, they were still kind of playing that sort of style, but I can tell you this, dude. Like when they would play, they were tight as fuck. They were tight. Like it didn't matter, whatever. Like watching them play back then. I mean, those dudes were probably playing together like every couple days. I mean, they were probably rehearsing so much. Like they were a goddamn force. Like it was impressive to see, even if we weren't like way into that type of metallic hardcore. They were a force. So, but I think I find myself doing this a lot, where there's a lot of bands that I might not necessarily be like super into their band, but I become fans of their band because of the people they are.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like there's a ton of bands that I love. I love their band, and I will buy their records even if I'll never listen to them, because I love them and I want to support their stuff. So there's I would key that early Splinter stuff up to like a band that I bought their stuff and I love them and I want people to buy their stuff. But I may have grown out of that style of metallic hardcore at that time.
Yeah. Speaking of Sean Jonas, which is a funny story that I have back. I live in a town called Sandown, New Hampshire, and he had relocated to Sandown, New Hampshire, and became a pastor at the church here. This was years back, and I had heard, the first lead singer of Zeo is the pastor at our local church or whatever. And the funny thing was, he started doing, basement shows in the church for like, not Christian bands, but just bands. And if you got to play down there, there was like a stipulation where there was no swearing allowed. You couldn't swear on the mic. You couldn't do anything like that. But it was like such a cool little like scene. I had seen a handful of shows down there, and it was just really fun to, take from back then, and he came here and relocated for a little while and stuff like that. Just really, I was like, really? And then, I got to go to a few shows here, which is kind of cool too.
That's all. I never really think about it. It's so strange to like actually think about this right now. But like, even today, I swear like a psychopath. I swear all the time. But when we play Zeo shows, I just don't care to do it.
Yeah,
it's so weird. Like, because we're like, and I don't even know. I guess maybe that was ingrained from like that early time when I joined. I'm like, oh, don't swear on the microphone. But I guess we're not really like one of those like, we're just not good at it. Like none of us are like really good at like getting up on the mic and fucking motherfucking move. Like we're like a weird band where we're like, Dan's like just in his world, man. All of us just get our own little world and like just leave us alone, and we're gonna smash our faces on our amp, and like you can just watch. We're not gonna tell you to do anything. So it's weird to think about that, because I never thought, like, we don't even like, Dan doesn't really ever swear in any songs, because like, dude, his lyrical content is so like, why, unless you really need it in there, like there's too many perfect words that he can use that don't even matter. Like I don't know. I think about that, man. We don't really like, I don't ever swear at shows.
Yeah, I think it's almost cheesy to like swear on the mic anyway, so that's why I kind of like when they were saying, well, if your band plays, you can't swear on the mic unless you're like a big tough guy metalcore band that's like, fuck shit up in the pit, like, which is kind of cheesy to me. Like it's a little corny to me.
Yeah,
but
I'm with you. Oh, yeah, I'm with you on that. I never really cared too much to do that stuff.
I have another funny Zeo story too. It was before you had joined the band, Splinter Shard and Blood and Fire had come out, and searching for those albums, I couldn't find them anywhere up in New Hampshire. I was like searching. I'd go to Newbury Comics, they didn't have it. So there was a Christian bookstore in Derry, New Hampshire, and somebody had said, oh yeah, like they have the Zeo stuff there, and I was like, really? And so I always had to take a trip to the Christian bookstore too. I was like, hey, do you have this CD by Zeo? And they're like, oh yeah, it's right over there in between like these. It was just so strange and odd, but those were where I would get my Zeo fixes from back then, and it's just funny that I'd have to go to a Christian bookstore to get them.
Well, here's another thing that I think is hilarious, because I remember walking into one of those places. And I remember going to like, our local like cool like the shop that would have like hardcore CDs or whatever, metal CDs. And I remember like there was a Zeo CD for like $10, and then you'd go to that place, like the Majesty place, and they'd be like $17. And they'd be like, "Oh, I guess that's the God tax you got to take there." Because like Jesus, really, man? Like, and especially when you know how much CDs are and like what the wholesale costs on them are, and come on.
I know it was, and when I was talking to you last night too, I had just missed you. It must have been you must have just had left Creation maybe within less than a year time where they played up in New Hampshire at Lawrence, Mass, and then the Zeo show that I had saw in Portsmouth, New Hampshire at the Elvis Room. You might have just joined afterwards because you played some of that Blood and Fire stuff before Liberate got it made, correct?
Yeah, when I first, I mean, the one cool thing was like when I first joined, we started writing. So like, we immediately started writing for Liberate, and we had like maybe one or two of the Liberate songs like ready enough for when we actually played shows that we could play them. Nobody heard them yet, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, like we were doing like pretty much mostly Blood and Fire songs, and then a couple of those. Which now that I think about it, super weird. Because when I don't remember ever playing a Splinter Shard song ever.
Oh, no kidding.
I remember playing Zeo shows, and the only stuff we would play would be Blood and Fire. We would do the songs off of that split.
Oh, with Training for Utopia.
Yeah, and then we would have whatever like newer Liberate stuff we were working on, and then it took a good 6 months or whatever, 5-6 months before like Liberate was ready to be recorded. Then we would play like the Blood and Fire and Liberate songs. It's like, man, but yeah, that's weird to think about because I remember when we did that god awful All Else Failed remake thing, which is a travesty to music kind, but when we did that, I had to learn all that stuff because I was like, I've never played any of this stuff.
Yeah. Because Skin Like Winter is on the Training.
That's a split song.
And then it got re-recorded.
Here's a funny story about that song. I never felt bad about taking the Skin Like Winter song and putting it on Liberate. I loved the song. I think it was a great song. But if you listen to Abnegation and you listen to, I think it's the second 7-inch they put out, the one with like Sonnen Remain, I think Sonnen Remain. Listen to that, and then go listen to Skin Like Winter, Russ Cogdale. I think you have some explaining to do.
That's
Russ and Brett have some explaining to do. That's all I'm gonna say.
And so, being in Zeo, you've been on 10 full albums, right? From the time you started till the Crimson Corridor had just come out.
Yeah, what is it? I think it's 10.
I think it's 10 albums.
Yeah. Jesus. Yeah. Yep. Holy shit.
It's 10 full albums, and obviously you being on Ferret and stuff like that was probably really, really cool too. And so out of all those 10 albums, what kind of is like, it's hard to say like your favorite or something like that, but what do you gravitate towards where you're like, I really enjoyed playing on this album? Was there any like favorites, or is it kind of everything is your favorite?
Well, I think a lot of the time, like all the records were super fun to make. I think that the one thing that I enjoy a lot more though recently, I think that the hardest record for me that I look back on now and was like, man, I didn't really have too much fun making that record I really didn't enjoy making Funeral of God. That was like way too stressful because that was like Jesse leaves, you got to live up to this. And we were in a studio that like the engineer and like producer was like up your ass because Ferret spent a lot of money and all this kind of dumb stuff. So like that record was really, really not a fun one to make. And even when I listened to, I don't like how that record sounds. So that one was my least favorite one. But all the records I've ever been on, like all of them have something special and fun for me. Like probably doing Fear outside of the newer records, because like the last like Well-Intentioned Virus and Crimson Corridor, making those records, like we're like we know what we're doing now. And like I go in there and we're just like, man, it's just awesome, and we just know what we're doing, we know what we want to do, and we have so much fun getting everything done, and we're like so on top of it. But Fear, working with a guy like Steve Albini that we've looked up to our whole lives, it's like he's something, you know, that Steve, like having a record done by Steve Albini is like a thing that like I can go in my life, in my musician life, I can be like, hey, I did that, you know. So that was really cool. But like him ending up being like the coolest dude ever, and like making the record, it felt like when you watch like people do records, like, or like when you watch documentaries about, like, because we were trying new stuff. The studio was gorgeous. Steve was like so good at what he did, and like you go there knowing what Steve's doing. Like you have to be on your game. So you know, so I think if anybody, when people say Albini's kind of what, like, I just think you go in there unprepared, and yeah, he's going to be weird because you're unprepared. Like, you need to be prepared. We knew what we wanted to do. He's not there to tell you what to do. He's there to document what you do. So like making that record was so much fun. Like, oh, everything about it was so much fun. There wasn't and the whole vibe around that place. So that's probably my favorite one that I can think of. But like those earlier ones, like Liberate was exciting. Yeah. Because it was like my first real studio experience. Because like even with the creation stuff, you know, we were on a shoestring, but like no budget. Like people talk about like low budget records, like there was no budget for that stuff. So, you know, we were like scrapping together $200 just to try to make it sound okay. In Silico, like we went into a real studio then, and we had one of the dudes, I think the guitar player of Anti-Flag, I can't remember his name, I'm terrible, but he was running the studio in Pittsburgh that Nathan was able to get reasonably a good price on, and we worked with him on In Silico. So, but it was like you had 4 hours or something to record everything. Liberate was the first time I was like, oh wow, we're here for a week. What? How's that even a thing?
I know. Seriously.
So that was super exciting. And then when we did Self-Titled, that was super fun because it was like just me, Jesse, and Dan, and we were just like trying all kinds of new stuff, and like we wrote some stuff while we were there, and we had some stuff ready. And Parade of Chaos was fun because we were like, just let's do whatever we want, man. Let's just have some fun. So a lot of all the records were pretty fun to make, but Funeral of God was my least favorite one.
Speaking of Parade of Chaos, I'm pulling out some more nostalgia.
Man,
I got the Parade of Chaos hoodie.
Jeez, dude,
I still have that.
I have some of those old shirts, but dude, what was this? I found a Chapter shirt.
Ooh.
Yeah, I'll have to send you pictures. I found a Chapter shirt. I found a Creation shirt. I found, I'll have to send you some of these. I have like quadruples of a ton of Creation and Chapter, like, what the hell?
Now I gotta ask though, are they all in youth large? Because back then,
no. I have a ton of patches, like a ton of Creation stickers and patches. I'll just send you a bunch of stuff because I have so much.
That would be awesome. That would be awesome. Yeah, it's funny because I saved old shirts, and they're so small because now I wear like large, extra large because I'm like getting older and fatter and stuff. What are we gonna do? I look at my old shirts and I'm like, this is youth large. There's no way that I would ever fit. So now, I have daughters that are growing up. I give them to them, and they just like rock them, even though they're not really into that kind of music. They love the shirts, so they're like, they'll go to school and like,
people be like, well, dude, eventually what's going to happen is they're going to go to high school, and there's going to be somebody in high school like, oh my God, my dad told me about that band. I love them.
Or a teacher is going to be like, hey, I know that
there
band.
You go. Yep. Well, dude, look at all like Turnstile and all this new stuff. Like all those, like a lot of those, like Code Orange, like they're from Pittsburgh. But a lot of those bands totally respect all that time period. Yeah. So like we do have like, there's a new push of like all these, I mean like Code Orange is on like a whole other level than that kind of stuff was. But like, there's a lot of bands that are like coming up now that like love that old like early 2000s hardcore scene, and you know, the Creation stuff, any of that kind of stuff. You know, I have dudes that I talk to that, yeah, like I talk about Creation like all the time with people.
Yeah,
It's awesome.
I do too. It's like I said, I love that era. It was just so special to me. Going back to Zeo though, and especially the new album, Crimson Corridor. Like I was talking to you last night. To me, like that, it's just recorded so well, and just because I do a lot of listening music wise, driving in the car, really loud, and I think it was just recorded so well, and I think not evolving into something different, but like the slowed down, almost like doomy aspects, and then the chaotic fucking crushing stuff that comes in. And Dan's vocals have never been any better. Like, you know what I mean? It's like that guy's a fucking beast, because his vocals shred so much, and it's like crazy. And I just want to, you know, take my hat off to you guys for putting out such an amazing album. And I think the reviews have been great too, and you know, so
yeah, we are so, and I mean, it's a lot of work. Well, you know, and the nice thing is too is the engineer Dave Heidick, and the studio that we go to in Pittsburgh that called the Church, which is funny, but it's like an old renovated church. But Dana, the owner of that, and Dave, like we've been working with them since we kind of got back together, and it's been so great because it's been a learning experience, like for all of us. Because like Dave isn't like a metal guy, but he knows tone, and he knows, he's a drummer, and he knows drums. Like the drums on, and honestly to me, the drums on Crimson are just so good. And like once you get like, really dude, once you get, to me, like you get that really good bass of like a good drum sound and good bass and real low end, and then you can bring the guitars in the right frequencies where they're supposed to be, and like like all of it, just like we've worked so hard to kind of like create this artwork, like this little painting of like sound, and we just Dave, oh god, Dave nailed it on this one. We all just worked super hard to get it to sound like that, and Dan is just a machine. He is he's a beast. He's and the stuff he's talking about now too, like lyrically, he's just on another level that I'm so in awe of him and what he does, and yeah, his voice, like to me, like that's it. Like without Dan, this isn't what it is, you know. So, and I think too, like that just some of the, like the world that he lives in lyrically now, and like the passion that he has for what he's talking about, it just shines through on Crimson for real. Like. And I mean, Well-Intentioned Virus it did, but I think some of the stuff that he's been talking to me about for this next thing, oh man, it just, like I think Crimson's like the beginning of like us really figuring out our path. So I think the next one.
And on top of that, like you got to play with your daughter on the web. She plays violin on the web with you, which is like really, really fun to hear. You know, how was that playing with your daughter on an album? So, you know.
Well, I remember me and my wife talked about, like, because Sydney's been playing violin for like 3 or 4 years, and I've always, like, because it's weird, like as a parent, you don't want to push your kids in anything. So like I was never like, you have to be a musician, you have to do, but she's like way like into art. She loves art. She draws all the time. And she loves music, so she's like really getting into piano now too, which could be something that happens again. But like, so the violin, you know, she's been playing violin, and there was a really cool idea I had that I asked, you know, Sydney wanted to do something and play on something, and I'm like, well, I have this really cool 2-note idea that if you do it over this part, I think it could sound really cool, and we'll see if it works. And literally, I have like a little Pro Tools set up in my one bedroom for like a little studio setup, and I had her go in there and I recorded her playing, and I sent it to Dave. I was like, hey Dave, can we see how this sounds on here? And I remember when we finally get it all finished up, I mean, obviously, like proud dad moment, obviously, because it's like, oh god, like, and having your daughter like just that whole thing is so special to me. But like, what was really cool is when Jeff called me after he heard the like mix, like the final mix of that violin in there, and Jeff called. He's like, I could not hear this song without that now. And I was like, man, because really, like once that was put on, like that whole that thing just totally changed, and it was really cool. And I told Sydney, I'm like, look, like the part you play on there is like integral to that sounding the way it sounds now. So it's really cool. So yeah, it's really, man, yeah, it's really neat to have that happen.
Yeah, that's awesome. But like I said, I missed when you joined Zeo, and the funny story was like when I saw that show, they played with up in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, at the Elvis Room. They played with a band called Lunacy, a band called Fault, which I don't know if you know Fault. They were on Life Force from like a European label. Dead Eyes Under, which I'm not sure if you know Dead Eyes Under is too. But all those bands that played, and I was friends with a band called Ukla the Mock.
Okay.
Which was on Life Sentence Records.
Wait a second. Hold on a second. The Elvis Room. Do you remember what year that was?
It was 90, I want to say 98.
Because I remember playing a show at the Elvis Room. One of the first shows I played with Zeo.
I mean, if it's weird that you were actually there, because do you remember after the show, all of the guys from Fault and Ukla the Mock were there, and we all went to Olive Garden and ate with Dan and Russ and Jesse, and like I said, you could have been there, but like I remember the bass player had like a shaved head. I forget what the name of the bass player was.
Was he like totally bald?
Like totally bald.
Was he real little?
Yeah, he was kind of smaller. Yeah.
Then I was there because Rob.
Oh, so you did play that show?
I did play that show. So check this out. Yeah, because Rob Horner was actually going to be possibly the guitar player because him and Jesse were super close friends. And when Russ was like, "Hey," because like I said, all of us know each other. So like Russ was like, "Hey, Scott's interested to play guitar." Jesse was like, "Oh, okay, well let's have Scott do it," because I mean I played in Creation, like he knew what I could do.
Yeah.
And we were all like, "Okay, Rob, would you be cool to play bass?" Because Zeo never had a real bass player, so it was like, holy cow, can we finally have like a full functioning like 5-piece? This is going to be great.
Yeah.
So yeah, if Rob was there, Rob wasn't. He joined exactly the same time I would have. So I guarantee you, and I remember that name now, the weird name you're saying, which I can't. But I remember playing a show with that. I know I've heard that name before. And like I said, the Elvis Room, because I think that's actually, dude. Oh man, I think that might be the first time we met Jeremy Ween, which he's from Boston area, like Winthrop. And Jeremy has been a close family member to Zeo since then. And that might be when we met Jeremy. I wonder if Jeremy's who brought us up to the Elvis Room.
I don't know. I mean, I did send the pictures. I DM'd the pictures to the Zeo.
I'm going to look.
I don't know.
Now, here's the thing. Back then, if that was in 98, I was a tubby piece of shit. So, like, I don't look anything like I do now. Like, I was, like, it was not good. So, I'm going to have to look. I'm going to see if I can find those pictures. I bet I was there.
Yeah, those pictures aren't good, though. Like I said, I had a disposable camera where you never know where you're going to get when you're taking pictures with a disposable camera. So, it's a funny story. We all went out to Olive Garden and ate and stuff like that. And
I swear, I think I remember that. I think I do remember that. I'm almost positive.
And I think, like, if I'm not correct, like, the bass player for Bury Your Dead was at the show too, before Bury Your Dead had even became a band.
Okay.
I mean, there was a lot of people in that crowd. I think Ryan McKinney from Trap Them was at that show too. I mean, it was like a who's who of bigger bands that actually became bands after.
Became something.
Yeah, definitely.
Jeez.
So,
well, that's all, dude. I think I was, and it's so cool to like think about that stuff because, like, yeah, I mean. We're all still close with On Earth, but I remember when On Earth was like they were just starting out. Like we'd play with them up there, and like we took them on a couple tours, and look at what On Earth has become. Like it's so fascinating to me to see what are this little weird scene that like we just kind of all fell into because there was nothing else to do, and we liked this kind of music, and you just start this thing and you just kind of fall into it, and what the bands that have come from that is just awesome.
Yeah, yeah. Speaking of new songs, I know you guys have already worked on a bunch of new songs. How many new songs do you guys have put down, and what's the future hold for the next release? I know this had just come out, but you were waiting on this, and it was going to come out, almost like a year before it had actually come out. So what's going on with like the new songs, and is there any plans of, down the road a release?
Oh yeah. Like we just, what we decide on is like, we kind of wait till we can compile a good bit of material. So then we'll record as much as we can at one time, since like everything Zeo does is all self-funded. Literally, like we Jeff runs all the business side of everything, financial side of everything. We run our own label. Like our label's basically just to put out Zeo records.
Yeah, yeah.
So we have to do everything the like financially smartest way we can. So we try to like compile 20 songs or so, and then we go in and record all that stuff.
Yeah.
Because then we always try to like, okay, well, we want to do some 7-inches that can help fund mastering or help fund manufacturing. Yeah. So we'll probably end up waiting for a little bit. There's probably like maybe 7 or 8 things floating around right now. Nothing, I don't think there's any fully formed songs yet. Dan's actually started writing some lyrics, but there's some stuff floating around. But within the next like probably year or two, there's going to be for sure like some 7-inches, definitely a new full length.
Yeah.
But I think with the way that the COVID thing has been, and hoping, fingers crossed, that things are going to like start to at least. I mean, we're never going to get away from it, but if it at least
turns around a little bit,
turns around enough that like that shows can happen, like we'd like to try to play as much as we could in 2022 on Crimson, since we really haven't had the opportunity to get out with that record.
Yeah.
And then sort of let it have a little bit of a record cycle, and then maybe start thinking about what we're going to do next, because I would like to see, especially with like how people have been reacting to some of the Crimson songs, like just see like how good that can get, and if we can push it a little more in 2022, if it like, if people really kind of like catch on to the songs, and but we're always like, we always have to think forward because it's all on us. So there will definitely be more 7-inches. We might even do some like cool stuff. Like we talked about doing like some cover stuff that would be out of the ordinary, that we could release something fun. Just because we do have the ability now to do like home recording, because Jeff finally like was able to get enough stuff for like his home drum recording. Yeah. And we're like, dude, I'm a purist, man. Like I'm all for people doing whatever they want, but I like live real drums. We don't like. We don't sound replace stuff. We don't like go in and do quantified fake drums and make it like we don't do any of that stuff. Every drum you hear hitting on our records is Jeff. So we had to get a good drum recording area to be able to record stuff, but so we can maybe do some stuff on our own now. So some cover stuff, and then for sure like some new songs and some probably a full length within the next year or two.
Nice. And on top of all that, Zeo's merch game is like top notch. I mean, dude, the merch game is top notch. Holy Mountain Printing, like
they are the best.
Like, anybody wants Zeo stuff, go to that website. I mean, literally, your guys' merch is top notch.
Yeah, Danny at Holy Mountain crushes, and he is everything he knows. He's just good. And he knows what's cool. And like all the artists that work with us, like they're so cool. They're so good. Everybody, we'll get t-shirt designs that like, I can't believe, like sometimes. And like, Danny's always like, this dude, he was doing these. And like, we're like, oh my God, this is amazing. Let's do it. So like he has facilitated an amazing merch store for us.
Yeah.
He's got so many good artists working for us. And then we've had like even like some of our own, like Chris Smith, the guy that designed some of the stuff around the live stream. We knew Chris from Pittsburgh, and like he's been doing some awesome stuff for us. So some of this later, like we did a poster and t-shirt with him. He did some t-shirt designs for us before. Like it's just, man. You know what? I think a big thing too for us, like we don't ever go at artists and like, hey, we want you to do a shirt like this. Like what makes it really cool is like you're an artist. You do what you do, and we'll just see if we like it. It's like I don't like telling people what to do. You're like that we want people to do their own thing, and that's like we like what you do. That's why you do what that's what we have. Like everything, like engineers, like we like what you do. We're not going to tell you how we want our record to sound. Like we're going to work together and like make things cool. So
and the cool thing too about Holy Mountain is they repressed those old albums. Like I made sure that I got a Blood and Fire shirt because it was, when I saw that all the old shirts and then the vinyl that had come out too was like a really cool thing that happened too. And I was stoked on being able to grab a Blood and Fire shirt because like I said, that album is very, very special to me. And
awesome, dude.
It's just cool things like that Holy Mountain does.
Yeah, they do. Like luckily we were able to hook up with the guy that did those original designs, like the original Blood and Fire and Splinter Shards and all that stuff, Dave Rankin. Actually, Tooth and Nail and the real reason for those like reissues is because of Unoriginal Vinyl getting it all done. Like Tim, like those guys and I think Jason, those guys have really stepped up that reissue game. And they did everything they did with that stuff is unbelievable. And without them, none of it could have happened. So we're like on Original Vinyl. We were so happy that they were able to do it. And as the band now, like we talked about before, like all of it's a family. So like we made sure that all the old guys, like when Splinter came out, like all the old guys got all the mechanicals that they were deserved. Like all the Blood and Fire guys got all their mechanicals like they were deserved. And we did the t-shirts because we wanted those t-shirts to go into like paying Dave, because Dave originally never got paid for some of that artwork back then.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah, like it was just like he was a new artist and like they used his stuff. So like we did all the t-shirts and he got a cut of that. And all the guys in Blood and Fire, all the guys in Splinter, like everybody got everything from what they worked on. So we made sure like everybody was presented with, was represented well. But yeah, the reissues were great. And then like t-shirts were just, a no-brainer. And we're like, we'll do the t-shirts and everybody was able to get something from that. And we do have some other, I think there's going to be a couple more reissues coming here that we're pretty excited about. So it's going to be awesome.
That's awesome. I wanted to talk real quick about Pack too. It's a little, not your typical music stuff that you're doing. It sounded a little, it sounds indie-ish, almost like a little pop, female-fronted vocals.
Yeah.
How's that been? And is that band still active?
Oh yeah. So we actually just have released it's not, I guess it's a 10-inch EP with 4 new songs. But I've been really like basically best friends with Josh Fiedler from Juliana Theory for years and years and years. So, and we've never had the opportunity to do a band together, and we ended up doing this really cool Tom Petty thing that we like covered some Tom Petty songs, and some of the other guys that we were matched up with, we just hit it off with everybody. So we started messing around and having fun with it. And like Chris from Punchline, I've known Punchline because they're from our area, and they're a pretty awesome band. Justin played drums for the Tom Petty stuff. Then Justin and Josh have been doing bands for the last 10 years or something. So we just hit it off and it went really, really well. And it took a while, but we were like, we wanted to find a singer and we couldn't find anybody. And luckily there was a friend of Josh's that like mentioned Kelly, and we had Kelly. Kelly's too good. Like she's way too good. So like it wasn't like an audition, but she like sang a couple things for Josh and he let us hear it, and we were like, okay, if that's no brainer, please will you sing? So yeah, we definitely are as active as like any band can sort of be in
Yeah.
this whole climate. But also too, like it's still new and like there's not really a lot of like we're still just working to get people to hear about it.
Yep.
You know, we have some stuff released, but like you know, it's a slow build because we're trying to do it ourselves. We don't want to
Yep.
get involved with anything too crazy because all of us have families. Kelly's actually uh, having her second child, so like she's you know we don't want to take anything away from like that part of anybody's life. We don't want to like you know most new bands if you're going to want to get noticed you got to be on tour for like 7 months,
Yeah.
but nobody's even really doing that anymore.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a slow build, but man, it's incredible. It's a new weird thing for me because I've never played anything like this before, but I've always loved this kind of music. So
Yeah.
yeah, we're just having a lot of fun with it, and we're gonna. I mean, there's a ton of songs we have still to release with that band too.
Yeah.
So hopefully, like once like maybe in 2022, if we can start kind of getting out of there a little bit more, maybe play some shows and then start recording some more because we'll be able to get out and do stuff. And yeah, I think with Pack, I don't think we're ever gonna like stop doing it. I just think that it's gonna be like hard to kind of like tour or anything
Yeah.
like that. So if you don't do that, it always looks like your band isn't doing much. But like we're always talking to each other, trying to rehearse and all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah. Somebody was asking the band name. The band name's Pack.
oh yeah,
PACK. And you can find it if you look for
mm-hmm.
it. Just Google it and there's like 2 releases out, right? That people
Yep,
can listen
yeah.
to.
There's a 7-inch, and then we just released this new one right now. So if you, it's linked up to like all the Zeo socials and the Juliana Fury socials. You should be able to find all that stuff.
Yeah. Speaking of that kind of music, I heard that you're a Tears for Fears fan. Did you
Oh my
hear the
God,
new
yeah.
Did you hear the new single that they had just
Yes,
put
I
out?
did. Oh, absolutely. And dude, like they're perfect. Like they don't, no matter how old they get, they always write great stuff. Like even their last couple of records, I mean, it's like the Beatles exist again. Like it's
Yeah.
that good. Like I love Tears for Fears, and yeah, I'm super excited about the new stuff. I'll be
Yeah.
buying
Yeah.
that once it's out.
Yeah, as soon as I heard they had a new single, I was like, oh, I like went right over to Spotify and listened to it. I don't want to keep you too long, so usually at the end I do a little rapid fire question.
Cool.
So we'll start the rapid fire right now. My
Awesome.
first question always is, what is your all-time favorite punk hardcore band from New England?
Oh, Cave In. I have to go Cave In.
Now, what era of Cave In, though? Everything or
See,
just?
I love when they started getting spacey. So I like Moral Eclipses, I guess, like Jupiter,
Yeah.
like all that stuff until now. Like so like Until Your Heart Stops obviously is incredible.
Yeah.
But like when they came into their own and became Cave In, to me was when Jupiter came out, because that was like nobody was able to do that at that time. Like that wasn't happening yet. Like so that's my favorite era, like that kind of stuff up until I still love them today. So
Nice. My second question, what was your first punk hardcore show that you attended, like a real punk hardcore show, not kind of like a Battle of the Bands type of thing, what was your first real hardcore, punk metalcore show?
I went to see Orange 9mm, Sick of It All, and Quicksand.
Nice.
And
That's a good
blew
first one
my
right
mind. Blew my mind.
there. That's a really, really good one. Another one, what is your favorite all-time show that you played? Obviously, I'll ask this with Creation and Zeo. What was your all-time favorite shows or shows? You can give me a couple that you played with both those bands.
Wow. So I think the most memorable favorite thing I can think of was when Creation, well, I think this was still when we were Chapter. So when Chapter did Cleveland Fest, and our show, it was when like nobody knew who we were, but we played pretty early and it was still unbelievable. Like people were still pretty receptive, but like the Abnegation show was like rock star shit. Like I remember when Abnegation played, and it was like 97 maybe. I think it was 97 or maybe 98, but I think it was 97. Could have been 96 actually, now that I'm thinking about it. Maybe it was 96. So anyway, whatever. One of those years. Abnegation played and that place was full, and people were losing their minds. It was so sick. So like
Yeah.
watching them in that environment was my favorite thing ever for like a chapter show. And creation, like we did some Galita Fest was pretty cool. But like honestly, when we were on tour, like I just loved meeting people. So like nothing really stands out to me crazy, but just getting to tour that negation and meeting all those dudes and like all that stuff is just unbelievably fun. My favorite Zeo show, it's going to be hard to deal with now because like this last Furnace Fest we just played hit everything you would ever want in a show. Like, because I mean, obviously you're not have been able to play for so long.
Yeah.
Then being able to play, like that's like almost like a whole like supernatural experience.
Yeah.
The show was unbelievable. It was just, I can't even put into words what it felt like to play that show. But I mean, the earlier Furnace Fests, it's weird because I think what sucks is like now that you're older, like dude, I just appreciate things so much differently. Like obviously, like back then, you're like, oh my god, I can't believe I get to do this. But at the same time, you don't appreciate it because you don't think it's ever going to go away.
Yeah.
When you're younger and you're on tour, you're like, this is what I'm doing. And then once like you don't really think, well, this is going to stop. And it does always, no matter what. It's always going to like either cut back or stop. So like now when we play, like everything we do is like way overly appreciated. Like holy cow, like way different. So like that Furnace Fest we just did, not only did we get to like reconnect with a bunch of bands and friends, the show was like on another level that I've never felt, I don't think.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. The lineup was insane too.
Yeah,
it just must have been such a fun experience. Like you said, almost like an outer body experience playing because it's been such a COVID restrictions and a lull of playing live and stuff like that. Like I can definitely I'm in tune with what you're saying for sure.
Yep.
All right, my next question: what is your favorite all-time hardcore metalcore show that you went to that you didn't play that you just attended to go see? Like, what was
Ooh.
Like you went and saw a band that you were dying to see, and then you saw them and you were blown away. Like, what's like one of your favorites that you guys didn't play at all?
Wow. So I'm trying to think of some of the shows I've been to, just because I always hated going to shows after you play them because you're like, I just want to play.
Yeah.
Man, my age is going to show because like I'm remembering everything that's like recent because I can't remember. I went to see when Converge and Neurosis did that tour.
Yeah.
Saw that, was totally just destroyed because Neurosis has been one of my favorite bands of forever. I have a ton of favorite bands, so there you go. But and Converge, there you go. But Amon-Ra opened that tour, and I never heard of them. No, but I mean that was like the first time I ever even knew that band existed, and I couldn't believe what I was watching. So it was like really awesome to see something that, because that doesn't happen very often when you're like, usually an opener, you're like talking to your buddy, you don't give a shit.
Yeah.
But Amon-Ra started, and I remember looking like both me, Dan, because it was like me, Dan, and a couple other friends went, and we watched them, and we're like, what's about to happen? Holy shit. I just couldn't believe it. And that's been happening a lot, man. Like we've been playing some shows where like some of the local bands, and Amon-Ra's like huge now, so it doesn't matter. Some of the local bands that like every time we do anything, like so many of these bands that are starting out, man, they're doing something right. Because like Yashiro, we didn't know who they were. We heard their record, we were like, oh, this is really cool, and then we like actually had them on a tour with us and blown away. Hollow Earth, we took them out, blown away. There's this band from South Carolina called Waft. I think they're actually done now. But they were just a local band that opened the show, and I was like, how is this? These guys should be like nationally known. Ton of good stuff out there, man. Ton of good stuff, new stuff.
I always talk about that too. That's the greatest feeling when you see an opener or you don't know of a band, and then you go to the show, and like you said, you're talking with your friends and stuff like that, and then all of a sudden like something grasps you, and you start watching them, and you're like, holy shit, like
Oh
who is
yeah.
this band? And then that's the feeling that I love. It's like finding a new band that I'm like, wow, this band just blew me away. And then I go back and I try to find anything they put out, and like,
Yep.
I'll buy a shirt because like I want to, support them in any way possible. And that feeling alone is like a very special feeling, especially in our scene.
I
And
know. Well, that's what we started doing. Like that's how you found the bands, because none of this stuff was ever. You can't find it. You have to go. You got to watch it, experience it. Like I mean, every band we've been out with now, like they have done something like that. Like we took out a band called Worm, unbelievable. Wolf King, unbelievable. Like all these things, like all these different bands. Like Atlas Moth has been around for a little bit, but we took them out with us, and we were kind of like just blown away by all these different things that are happening now, and people. There's so much good stuff out there.
Yeah, definitely. I'm a movie guy. I watch a ton of movies.
Me too.
I always ask this. What was the last movie you watched?
We just watched Halloween Kills.
What did you think of that? Because I have some opinions on that.
I don't know, man. Honestly, I love John Carpenter's top. Right, The Thing is maybe my favorite horror sci-fi of all time.
Yeah, so amazing.
And Halloween, the first Halloween. People might not like what I'm going to say right now, but you don't have to do it again. Everything they do, every single Halloween, and I love Michael Myers, and I'm so happy they still have Michael Myers in movies. I love it. I want to see Michael Myers. I'm all in.
Yeah.
But the movies they're the same damn movie every single time. And they did it perfect in the original.
Yeah.
And I don't want answers. Why do people do that with these movies?
Yeah.
I don't want answers. I don't care if Michael Myers is a real guy. I don't care if he's evil incarnate. That's something not natural. Don't tell me. I don't need to know any of that stuff. I don't need to know. Just let it be what it is. But I mean, it's the same thing over and over again. Here he comes. He's going to kill everybody. You think you might beat him. You know what would have been awesome, and I know people would hate this, and I don't want to spoil the movie, if the end would have just been like what we thought was about to happen.
Yeah. If he was bludgeoned to death.
Yes. If they would have bludgeoned Michael Myers to death, that takes balls.
Yeah.
Why do you have to do it? Yeah.
That's what I was hoping for. And then the ending happened, and I was like, oh my God, it just I don't know. I would have been happy. Honestly, Halloween 2 is my favorite. I would have been good if they had just ended after Halloween 2.
Yes, because to me, what would have been sick is John Carpenter's original idea. I get it. Michael Myers is such a great character. So you do Halloween 2, and it's done. And then Halloween 3 is the original idea, where it's just a different story about Halloween every movie.
Yeah.
So Halloween 3 with the masks and all that craziness, everybody shits on it, but it's super cool. So you do that, and then the next Halloween 4 is Halloween in another town that does something weird. And then guess what? You can make the movies forever because it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Or do something I don't know, maybe Michael Myers is this thing because there's a copycat every time or something. I'm just kind of done with you could have ended Halloween, the first one they just did before the kills. The Rob Zombie ones I don't even care about. I don't even pay attention. Yeah. But Halloween, this newest they could have just ended it with them burning in the damn house.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, I know. Speaking of Halloween movies, and it's the time of the year, obviously Halloween's tomorrow. What's your favorite all-time horror movie?
So The Thing, even though I consider that more sci-fi, is probably tops. But honestly, I think the movie that did the most horror to me was probably Jaws, man. A lot of people, I know, now people look at Jaws as a horror movie because it basically is the scariest thing ever to me.
Yeah.
Being in the ocean, and not only are you bit, you're going to be eaten by a 24-foot shark. And here's what's great about Jaws, right? They have found 22-foot sharks now. Great white, like Big Blue, is 22 feet. We're not far off from Jaws. So like that stuff does exist, and the chances of you getting eaten by a shark is like you have a better chance of winning the lottery. I get it. But man, like it's so terrifying to me, and the way that movie was done, like just you don't see anything. Like I thought that was, I love everything that Jaws is, because it's like that first scene where she gets thrown around in the night. God, that movie, I just love it. But you know how, like, if you're a horror fan, like, you know, slashers are a different thing. Then there's like the gore movies, because I love a ton of like just sickening gore movies. And I love like the only ones that I don't really get into are the supernatural ones. I just kind of don't care. Like The Exorcist, dude, whatever.
I'm not too in tune with ghost stories, because I've seen it so many times, and it's always the same tropes that they're doing. And like it's like I'm not down with really, like you said, possession movies and ghost movies. They just don't resonate with me at all. And speaking of Jaws, it's funny because I had seen it when I was real young. I wouldn't go in my grandparents' deep end pool for years because of Jaws, because I thought Jaws was in the deep end.
That's what I mean. Like
I wouldn't go in there.
And I still, like, even when I get in the ocean now, like, I know there are things in there. And like like in your head, you're all like, that movie will never leave your mind. It just doesn't leave. So
you don't want to go too far out into the ocean. I'm always like, all right, I'm about this high. That's good enough for me. I'm not going over my head.
No way. Yeah. So no, I think Jaws is the most terrifying of like what it did to me. But yeah, like I'm with you, because like Jaws, the shark's like a little bigger than normal, but like it's not out of the realm of possibility. Like the ghost shit and the demon stuff, like I don't believe that anyway. So who cares? Doesn't scare me.
I'm with you too. My next question is, I'm kind of a big hip hop guy too. Like back in the 90s era of the golden era of hip hop, boom bap and stuff like that. I listen to a lot of new stuff too, not like the trap type stuff. But if you've been listening to any hip hop, what have you been listening to?
I don't really, but I actually like, I kind of stick back to the older stuff. Like I mean, I always, there's going to be a soft spot in my heart for like Run DMC. I don't know if you consider that hip hop, but I love Run DMC. I love some of the other stuff I listen to. I mean, I kind of like NWA. I'll still listen to those records, but that's gangster rap, I guess. I don't know. Like, I don't know how. I love, so this is totally separate, but I'm a big trip hop guy. So like, I listen to Portishead all the time.
Oh yeah, Portishead's so good.
So and there's like a bunch of really cool that kind of stuff that I listen to, but like straight hip hop, probably not. Not that I don't like it though. Like I'm like pretty open with all of it. I just it's just not. I just don't really listen too much. But if there's some dude, you should send me some stuff that I should open my mind to.
Yeah, I'll definitely send you something. And my final question is, what is your favorite songs to play live with? Let's go Chapter, Creation, Zeo. What are the favorite songs you like to play live in those three bands?
So Chapter, when we finished Descent from Heaven, that was my favorite song, which kind of goes in with Creation, because I still love that song. Iconography of John Henry is one of my favorite songs, because it just goes all over the place and people don't know what to do, and it's awesome. With Zeo, probably I love playing like 5 Year Winner, because it's obviously the one that everybody knows and play, and like the reactions are what's more like cool to me than actually playing the song. But I love playing the intro to Liberate. We do like the intro, and then we play Into Savannah usually. And doing that, I still get like goosebumps. Like when it goes from the intro into Savannah. So like, I love that. And I love playing this new stuff. Dude, God. Because it's like, I feel like Creation again, because I'm actually doing crazy stuff. And it's like, so it's like, oh man, I'm like, I get a workout with my hands, and like I feel like, yeah, this is cool because it's like not that easy.
Yeah. I love Transitions. That song on the new album is so good. Like I
Oh
love
yeah.
it. I had one quick question too. I know I should be asking Dan this, but like, what was the like? It's probably more of his, you know, answer. But what was the mindset of kind of getting singing into Zeo? Because a lot of people like kind of turned off when the singing came in, like, you know, the core, you know, old schoolers that were like, oh, they're changing up and they're gonna try to be commercial. And what was kind of the mindset of the singing coming into Zeo back then?
Well, I think actually probably good to ask me. I do all the like clean singing, so I just wanted a different aspect in the band, and Dan was really open to any of that kind of stuff. He's always been open. So I do think the way we originally incorporated it wasn't the best way, because I do think that it did sound formulaic, sort of like it ended up being like, oh, you're going to sing a chorus, which then obviously makes you feel like, oh, the chorus is sung, so they're trying to break into a different market.
Yeah.
I never really wanted it to be that way. I wanted the vocal and the singing parts to be just aspects of like an instrument.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it took until like Well-Intentioned Virus to really understand how to incorporate it in a way that wasn't just normal chorusy parts. So like the way I do it now is it's literally it's a secondary thought of thing. We don't focus on the singing parts. And the only time they get implemented is if it can add to the part.
Yeah.
So like, for example, like with the way Croatoan was, it we didn't even have the singing parts figured out until I went down to the studio. And I was just like, I have a really cool melody idea, so maybe if I just sing what Dan's saying, it would sound cool.
Yeah.
So it was there to like kind of just be a background or like something that could move Dan forward.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we do now. Like I look at it as like more like anything that we can do to like add, almost make it an effect, add it cool. We don't use singing as like, we're going to wrap a song around the singing part. It's more or less, here's the song, and then here's the singing part. That's just kind of like put in as like a little bit of like a like spice to add to it. But I do think like originally, like, and people were pretty vocal about how they were weird about it. Like some stuff on Funeral of God really is like a chorus, and it's like, that's, what are you guys trying to do? Because that's really not, Zeo's like not that type of band. We're like an ugly, weird, like drop tune, messy, sludgy thing. So like, I really don't want to like have like a Foo Fighter singing part, that doesn't really, and that's kind of what we were doing. Like some of the stuff on Funeral was like that, or like even Awake had a ton of like these weird choruses, and like, we went back to the the notepad and like, we're going to do it this way. So like now that's kind of like our thing, where it's like, there's going to be singing, but it's going to be weird, and I might just do it one weird part that doesn't ever repeat.
Well, I was going to mention, because on Crimson Corridor, it's almost like eerie singing. Like it's not like so clean, and like it's almost like like I said, eerie-ish, like kind of, which goes so well with like the music that's going on, and it's different from the earlier albums. I feel like it's not to say it's better or worse or whatever, but it's like
I think it fits.
I like what it's going into. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And in future endeavors, when the new songs you guys are working on, I'm very curious to see what it sounds like, because I'm really enjoying the new album.
Yeah, I think that's really where it's going to go. Like I want to use vocals as like an added instrument. I don't want to ever use it as like a main focal point. So I think a lot of the stuff we do is going to probably end up being like that.
Yeah. And what was the first release that actually had singing from Zeo on it?
Well, I mean, honestly, there was some singing on like Self-Titled. I think Jesse did some singing back in those earlier songs. Yeah. So
that was the first album that had singing on it.
Yeah, like that was the first album that had some singing on it. Liberate didn't have any singing.
Yeah.
Self-Titled did, and then Pray to Chaos had a lot of singing. I mean, we had Angel Without Wings was like a Rolling Stone song or something. So it was like, So we've implemented it, but like I think what it was like when we did it on Funeral of God, it really did kind of lend itself to sound more like we were trying to market the band in a different way. So
Yeah, yeah. Somebody just wrote U.S. tour, Code Orange, Candiria, Zeo, Year of the Knife.
oh, I'll do that in a heartbeat, dude. Are you kidding me?
Yeah,
Candiria and Code Orange, and you're of course. I'll do. I want to play with everybody, man. I want to. That's my thing. I want to meet and be friends with as many people as humanly possible.
yeah, yeah. I want to thank you so much for taking time out. You know, it's. I know people are busy on the weekends, and that's where I get to do this because, like, I work and I have two daughters that are in sports, and I have dogs, and my wife is.
Oh, what kind of dogs?
I have a rat terrier and I have a Staffordshire terrier.
You got to send me pictures. We're like,
I
I'm a fanatic. I'm a dog fanatic. So.
Yeah, yeah. I love dogs. We're talking about getting another Staffy too. So.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
please.
I think we're adding 3 dogs. So.
That's awesome.
Which will be chaos, but I love dogs so much. I'm a huge dog guy.
Same here.
But like I said, thank you so much. I'll send you some stuff. Hip hop wise,
please, dude.
I'll actually send you a link to my old buddy's band, Ukla the Mock, that they had some unreleased stuff that came out that's really, really good. I think that you'll dig it too as well.
Awesome, dude. And yeah, I'll get your address from you. I'll send you some old Creation and Chapter stuff.
Oh, I would be so pumped on that. Like I said, that stuff is my era. I love that stuff. I still listen to it now all the time. Like, it's always in rotation because I'm always driving, and like I'm always putting, you know, all the stuff that I used to love on constantly. So
that's incredible. Awesome.
But I appreciate it, man. Have a great night, and let's stay in touch, definitely.
Oh yeah, dude. Honestly, I'm on. Like anytime you message me, I'll give you like emails and like phone, all that stuff, man. Please, yeah, keep in touch for sure.
All right, man. Have a great day, and thank you so much, man. All right.
You too. Thanks.
Take care.
Bye-bye.